can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Stephanie, who is the founder of Daughter Creative. And Stephanie, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. There's a couple series I've done. This is part of the Top Agency series. So I'll mention a couple interesting ones from the agency side, but also Stephanie, along with me, are in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And so there was a really good one with Vern Harnish, who started EO. And so that was a really interesting episode. Also, Robert Hartline, who's in EO Nashville, talked about how he built up a company to 9 figures and then ended up selling it. And he has a separate software business as well. So that was interesting, kind of hearing his journey. And some of the top agency ones, there's a really interesting one, Stephanie Todd Taskey, who basically pairs private equity with agencies and helps sell agencies. And he's got the Second Bite podcast. So he found sometimes people sell more on the second bite than they do on the first, because when they sell to private equity, and the private equity sells again, they roll some of that equity into the whole private equity fund. So super interesting on the kind of landscape of the agency world. Another interesting one was Kevin Hurrigan, Spinutech. He started his agency in 1995. So it was interesting to hear the landscape of business, the internet, and agency life through all those times. So that was a good one as well. And check out more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Stephanie would call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, but focus on running their business. So for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Stephanie Kochorek, and she's the co-founder and creative director at Daughter. You can find them at daughtercreative.com, and they're one of Calgary's top creative and design agencies. Daughter has been widely recognized by a number of publications, Strategy Magazine's Small and Design Agency of the Year Awards, Strategy Magazine's 2023 Creative Report Card, and the Institute of Canadian Agencies. I actually had Scott Knox on the podcast, who's shared some interesting insight as well. Her global approach to branding and their team's global approach has been honed through years, spent working on Fortune 500 brands for some of the most progressive agencies in Canada and US. They've worked with companies like the Alberta Cancer Foundation, Calgary Foundation, Own Cancer, and many, many more. Stephanie, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So just start off and talk about Daughter Creative and what you do. And if you're listening to the audio, there's a video portion, and I'm going to pull up their website.
Yeah, so we're first and foremost a branding agency. Really where we specialize is in helping companies understand their identity and then communicate that to whoever their customers might be. Identity is a complicated thing, and it's no different when it comes to brands. We used to talk about consistency, that used to be the golden rule of branding, that everything had to look the same. It had to be exactly the same. But now, because we're so connected to our audiences, what we look for is congruency. People want to feel the energy, the idea. They want to know what a brand stands for. And that's the work we do, is helping those organizations really understand in a concrete way who they are. And then we help them communicate that through often visual identities, a lot of naming, and a lot of content creation on their behalf.
So
Did I
talk
do
about
it?
identity for a second. And at what point do they usually come to you that they need to rebrand?
Yeah, it's always different. In the beginning, we worked with a lot of startups, like tech startups, which is a lot more straightforward. It's harder when you have these legacy companies. We worked with TransAlta, billion-dollar business, and they came to us and, they just didn't feel like their identity was aligned with who they really were. But there's a lot of work that goes into figuring out, okay, what is the story we're going to tell? To me, it's always strategy. We have deep conversations, interview a lot of stakeholders, look at the landscape. Um, but really we're telling the truth. Like I know that they're like sometimes advertising branding, it's like, you guys are a bunch of liars. That customers are so savvy, and I feel like we're really quick to be like, nah, that doesn't seem right. So much of our upfront work is really deep listening. And usually the answers show up there. This is who you are, and this is also going to resonate with your audience, and this is a story that we can help you tell.
Do you remember, Stephanie, an example? People's perception of themselves may be different from how other people perceive them. An example where you interviewed the stakeholders, maybe customers, maybe partners, whatever, and you came back to the company and you shared some of that deep listening, and maybe they were taken aback. Maybe they're surprised. I don't know. Maybe there's not a time where they're surprised.
I know, I've definitely had a few of those. It's funny because what you have on screen right now is a company called Radical. And a radical like is actually the mind of a seed. So it's how a plant thinks, but also this notion of being radical. When that company came to us, it was a merger between, I'm going to call it 5 different organizations, all with very similar acronyms. So it was like CCSI, CGSI, and it was every, iteration of climate smart group, blah, blah, blah. And, they had a really charismatic CEO at the time, obviously a very complicated stakeholder environment because you have all these people coming together. I work with an amazing strategist named Claudia, and, she did some really, like, she does a lot of that work for us of like the deep listening, and really came back and said, like, people are done now with pessimism. They want optimism. And basically, the role of Radical, or this merger of organizations, is to help companies monetize like the good things they do for the environment. So they help you sell carbon credits. They'll also advise you on, these are good ways to do it in a cost-effective way. So it was really,
Is this Radical right here?
yeah, this is Radical.
Okay, so we're looking at kind of a body of water and then kind of large.
Years.
I don't know what you talk about them, like yoga balls. I picture like huge round balls. Like, so anyways, keep going.
Yeah. Anyways, so we came back to them, and they wanted us to rename them. And at the time, it's like they're like Climate Smart Group is where they're at, and we're like, your name is going to be Radical. And then we tell them this beautiful story of, the mind of a seed. And it's also, you're doing something radical. Prior to that, it was like, oh, we have to choose. We're either environmentalists or we're here to make money. And we're like, no, here's a radical notion. You can do both. Like, both those things are not misaligned. Those things are aligned. Radical will help you get there. And they were.
This is Radical right here.
Yeah, this is Radical. And I think they looked at us like we were kind of a little crazy. Like that just felt like a lot, and different people had different notions. Anyways, the CEO ended up, it was like a Wednesday, and he's like, I need to come down to the office. Like, I need to look into your eyes. And I was like, okay, yeah, for sure. And came down, and he said, like, am I really going to do this? Like, am I going to call my company Radical? And I was like, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you the future, but this makes sense. It's true, and it's brave. And people love bravery. We want to see people stand out, and we want to see brands stand out for good reasons. And he went for it. I was like, you don't have to. Like, I understand it's a lot. We have some softer, easier names, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it. And they did it. It was massively successful. I think some of the best comments were like, my kids think I'm cool now, you know? They all of a sudden like had credibility with their young kids because this is it, you know, it's not a stuffy brand. Like coral was their main brand color. It's actually it was disappearing coral. It was Pantone's color of the year because it's a color found in nature that there's a chance we're not going to see anymore. So, you know, these were bold decisions, especially for Calgary, you know, corporate Calgary, like can be quite stiff. But you know, they initially couldn't quite, they're like, oh God, are we gonna do this? And then they did it. They were so proud of themselves. You know, it made hiring easier. They ended up getting acquired. And the power of the brand was actually, you know, something that they cited in the acquisition because it was a strong brand that told a strong story and they saw value in that, which was, you know, a really from the sort of look me in the eyes and tell me this isn't a horrible decision moment to, you know, the way that whole company just embraced it and felt proud. And, you know, there was some pep in the step because this was true for them. This was real.
I'm sure with rebrands, I mean, it takes some type of leap, right? Because it's not going to be quite similar always as what they have. So it's going to be uncomfortable, I imagine. How do you, okay, now you have the brand. How does that translate into the content? Like we're looking here. How did you come up with, we're looking at a body of water here. There's balls floating over it. Talk about how the brand translated to this, what we're looking at.
Yeah. So this video actually has a voiceover that, you know, really we call it a rallying cry video. It's the emotional touchstone for the brand. So it's really like emotion drives behavior, right? Not our rational minds. It's our system one thinking. It's our gut brain. It's intuition. Like that's how we make choices. We know that. That's just science. That's Pulitzer Prize winning science. Um, so we know that that's what we're dealing with. And minds work in metaphor, right? Like there's this wonderful study that I love so much. If someone hands you a cold drink, you're going to rate their personality as cold. If somebody hands you a warm drink, you're going to rate their personality as warm. So those intangible effects apply to color, to shape, to sound, to imagery. Like if I have soft shapes, I think it's soft. If I have sharp shapes, I think it's sharp. So when we're, you know, crafting the Radical brand, you can see the logo. There's that exclamation mark in the middle, but it's also a bit of a fulcrum. So we're talking about balance. You know, we look at what's the voice of that typeface? Well, it's all uppercase. Like that has a perspective. That if that was like an all lowercase serifed font, like it might feel pretty friendly and approachable. This is going to tell you what's up. It's clean. It's to the point. Like it's not verbose and all over the place. And then in terms of like these big spheres in nature, it's really, and this, like this sounds strange, but it's like mood and vibe. Like what is the right vibe of this? You know, we want that connection to nature because that this really is, it's a company about the environment. It's how ultimately that's what we're trying to do. But then these shapes are super progressive. You don't see them anywhere. Those were rendered by a 3D artist and then, you know, placed in these like almost precarious balance points, right? Like that ball is trying to stay there. So it's this merger of the esoteric, the technology, because Radical is a technology company first and foremost, but then they're, you know, why are they doing it? What's the point? Well, it's the natural world. That's what we're trying to protect. So you know, it's like art. Like it has to tell the right story. You have to be able to unpack those elements, and it feels right on a very intuitive level.
No, Stephanie, thanks for sharing that because there's a lot that goes behind the thought process, which is interesting. And how does being a copywriter help you in your career?
Yeah, it's funny.
I mentioned copywriter because like all the copywriters or direct response people I interview, they really, whatever it is, the copy with images, it's all about evoking an emotion. right? To deep-seated emotion, not even the emotion that people think they have, but it's like that deep-seated. So talk about how being a copywriter has helped you.
Yeah, I think it is one of our most as an agency, it's one of our most powerful tools. Like my team will laugh because our clients cry all the time. Like it's a pretty regular thing. We'll present, like I said, a rallying cry video to them. And like more times than not, like somebody's feeling a little misty-eyed. Um, to me, what's actually happening in that moment is they feel seen because they're coming to us and they're like, what's my identity? Like, who am I? I kind of understand, but I don't really
Maybe you
know.
should do this for teenagers.
Honestly, give me some teenagers.
We'll help you with
I've
your
got two
identity.
coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they maybe do need a rebrand. And I think it's this feeling of being seen. It's like, oh, like you finally see me now. There's deep relief when people feel like we actually, when I feel like somebody really gets me. I'm like, oh, you get what I'm doing in the world, and you've made it clear for me. Now I can tell other people. And I think writing is a really powerful way into that. And usually if we can agree on that component of it, it's we'll always lead with the rallying cry, which is us saying like, here's in words who we think you are. This is the verbal identity. This is how you speak. This is what you believe in. And then the second component of that is your visual identity. Like, how do you look, and how do those things merge together to create a fulsome identity? So I think, being a writer, um, yeah, like copywriters are strategists. I mean, you also have to be conceptual and you have to understand how those things weave together, the visual and the verbal. So it was a great background for me.
You know, people may be thinking, Stephanie, that's cool. I mean, it's radical. They're helping the environment. They're making big change. I am not that type of company. But here you have a cinnamon roll company. So talk about the rallying cry and what you did with the cinnamon roll company. It looks delicious also.
Very good. Yeah, and that's actually an international, like they're in Dubai, they're all over the place. Again, it all comes back to strategy. And we won't work with clients like if they don't feel on some level that they're contributing to the world. Like it's just not for us because there's nothing to say at that point. I'm like, I got nothing to talk about. With these cinnamon rolls, like they're sold in mall kiosks. Um, your audience is teenagers, right? Like that's who's eating these, and maybe like moms that are shopping with their kids. And what is this for them? Like, what does that signify at the time? It's like a moment of joy, right? Like this is a moment of happiness. This is a reprieve from everything else that's been going on. It's a chance to just sit and savor something, and they are delicious, by the way. And so you can see the voice of the brand here, like let the good times roll, for a smile that sticks. Like this isn't heavy. We're not talking about world peace. But we are talking about, just the human satisfaction of like eating something delicious. And again, with color, we're looking at colors that taste good. Like color has a taste to it also, right? Like what's the flavor of this? Like I can tell that it's, sweet and a bit savory, but still, it's also not Skittles. So,
I'm wondering what made you start your agency?
yeah,
Because
great
you'd
question.
worked for many agencies. What was that
Yeah.
time when you decided I'm going to start my own?
To be honest, I like didn't ever have any ambitions of being an entrepreneur. I moved back to Calgary when I started having kids, and I was freelancing a lot. And sort of one thing just came into it, like one thing rolled into another, and it was like there was enough work that there needed to be other people to do it all. And then I think in that moment I was like, oh, like maybe this is a secret dream that I'm having now. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like if there was just like an office and like I was the boss of one person, like that would be insane, like I was like, that was like more than I could have dreamt of. Um, and there's a quote that has always stuck with me. It's you'll accomplish less than you think you can in a year and way more than you think you can in 10. And that has held true. Like we're only 8 years old now. And if you had told me when I started, like that we would have, that I would have been the founder of this agency that has achieved, things beyond my dreams, I would have just laughed. But here we are.
What are the key positions you put in place along the journey? Or what'd you hire for first?
Accounts. So Jill up there is also a partner in the business. I remember when we were first talking about working together, she's like, how long does it usually take you to respond to client emails? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like 2 weeks, like 1-2 weeks. And she was like, oh, she's like, for me, it's same day. I was like, right, I need you. And that's very much our yin yang vibe now. Like Jill's incredible. She's so on it. And I always joke, she's like eight, like she has the energy of 8 people in one person. I'm always envious of that. And just, like we'll go talk to every client, like remembers, everyone's kid's name, like just is so talented. And I'm not like, I do not want to be at a networking event. That's my idea of a nightmare. Like I'm not a good schmoozer. I do not like small talk. I really struggle. So we're a really good balance for each other in that way. That was a really key position.
How'd you meet her?
She worked at another agency in Calgary, and it's a small enough world that everyone knows everyone.
So after Jill, what position was next that you hired for?
Ben, who is a designer, like just he's seen everything. And I think it's been really interesting for him and I, because I didn't know anything about leadership. Like I literally was like, sounds cool to be the boss of people. Like I'm like, I have power. I'm like, that's great. I want it so bad. And then I don't know, it's like in my mind, you get there and you're like, yeah, everyone's just going to do what I say and this is going to be awesome. And then when you're there, you're like, oh no, this doesn't work like that at all. Like that is not at all what being a leader is about, even the slightest. So I think it's like, Ben had to go through a lot with me as I learned how to be a leader and what that actually means and how to show up. And he was incredibly patient and he's phenomenally talented. And just like, we'll always, if it's like, yeah, when there's those fires and everything's going to hell, like Ben is the first one to raise his hand and be like, I got this. Like, how can I help? How can I jump in?
So talk about the leadership piece. What have you learned about being a leader?
Yeah, I took a lot of coaching. I've read a lot of books. I think I sort of started out thinking that it's like you either were or you weren't. And I'm naturally really bossy. So I was like, oh, I'll be so good at this. I love being a boss. Like I've bossed everybody my whole life. And then realized, no, that's not what it is at all.
Really bossy. That's funny.
I am. It's like I've been told I was bossy since I was a kid, and I am bossy. But to me, that's not the same as being a good leader. It's really empathy. Like you have to see the people in front of you and understand my motivations and what I like and what feels comfortable for me. And when I'm engaged is not the same. Like everybody has their own unique, set of things that they're bringing to the office, like story, what they want out of the experience. So it's understanding that and having empathy towards it, and then making sure that they're finding a way to like meet those deep needs, like not the need for a paycheck or the need for something to do between the hours of 9 and 5, but sort of that deeper calling. Like, what are you here for? What are your gifts, and how do you want to show up?
What have you discovered with people? Like, what are some examples of deeper callings?
The probably the person that's easiest for me, because we're the same in a lot of ways, is my executive creative director, Kelly. Um, her and I are cut from the same cloth. It's like, I don't care about the experience. I don't need it to be a good time. Like, I want the work to be good. I want the work to be good. It's like, if the work is good, if it's beautiful, if it says what it's supposed to say, like, that's all I care about. I don't care about how the clients feel. Like, none of that matters. I'm like, I just want to put good work out into the world. And her and I are super aligned on that. Like, and so we have great camaraderie, because it's like, we'll scrap hard. Like, her and I will fight constantly, but it's a sign of respect, because she's like, I know what you want. You want the work to be good. And I can say, hey, I don't think you're doing this right. And I know what you want, which is you want the work to be good. But then I have other employees that really have this, like, a deep need for harmony. Like, they need to feel like there is like peace and like calmness, and that there's like connection and respect. And I think an like early version of me would have been, what's the point of that? Like, why do you need that? That seems dumb. Why that's not important at all? I don't know, who cares? Like, why do you need to feel connected? Like, just get the job done. It's fine. But now I realize how important that is. And for all of us, like, we need people on the team that have um like diversity of thought and experience, um and so it's making room for those things, and saying, like, I know you need to feel connected at the workplace, and how do I foster that? And sometimes it's like, let's have a 20-minute conversation about your dog, or whatever. It's like, I do those things because I'm like, this is how I show up for you. This is what's meaningful for you. Um, and so giving everyone permission to take meaning from what they take meaning from, and to not say, oh, this is the thing you should derive meaning from. It should be this because this is what it is for me. It's like, oh no, that might not be the same, but it's still really important that we honor one another and learn how to share space and achieve things together.
How do you discover those things? I don't know if there's something in the hiring or onboarding process. I was talking to someone who's an executive coach for companies, and he implements DISC, for example, type of things. Not every company does those type of assessments, but how do you, as a company, discover those, deep callings or people's personalities, so there can be harmony among someone who just get the job done and someone who's like, I want to work harmoniously with everyone?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating thing for me. I had a business coach who was so profound for me, who I learned so much from. Um, and what I didn't know is that like, all of those major personality tests, like whether it's DISC or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, whatever, they actually all come back to Jung. Like, they're Jungian archetypes. And what's really interesting is that, like, we use Jungian archetypes to create brands, and actually all of the big brands use Jungian archetypes. So Disney is the innocent and the magician. It's a pairing of those two archetypes that create the personality of Disney. Coca-Cola, just the innocent. Harley Davidson is the rebel. So it's funny because I'm like creating personalities for clients. And then I use the same, like, we use the same thing in the office. We go by colors, but it's like DISC, same. So everyone in my mind is like a red, yellow, green, like I know more or less, when within like 20 minutes of talking with someone, like, once you're sort of used to it, like, you can clock somebody and say, oh, right, like, this is, and it's not like, oh, that's it, and they're that forever and there's no nuance to it. But by and large, yeah, I find it really helpful. And then it has also really helped me explain my personality to other people, because they might be like,
How you describe your personality?
I'm incredibly results oriented. I like to, that's when I'm happiest, when things are getting done. So I'm a strong D
Do you
or a
have
red.
any do you have any favorite resources? Like you mentioned there's been leadership books or I don't know on this topic, Jungian archetypes. What are some of your favorite business or leadership resources?
Yeah, my business coach, the one I was talking about, his organization is called Culture Smith. He has a podcast, he puts out a ton of great content. All of that is really good. Yeah, lots of books on young. Like, are you talking just in terms of the archetypes and how
It
those
could
are?
be archetypes or it could be leadership books that some of your
Yeah.
favorites.
In terms of like brand personality, Debbie Millman, design thinking, is phenomenal. It's just essays. It's a series of essays. Really interesting. Um, from a leadership perspective, I mean, Masterclass is like killing it for me right now. I'm obsessed with Martha Stewart. I cannot get enough of her.
Why Martha Stewart?
um, I just she's 82. She was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She opened one of the top 50 restaurants in North America. She runs this, insane acreage. Everything is on point. And she just doesn't like she's such a rebel. Like there's no one who's telling her what 82 looks like. She's like, I'll tell you what it looks like. I'll be whoever I want to be. And I love that. I love when people break the mold and she was like, I'm gonna go to jail and become best friends with Snoop Dogg. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just, and she's like, and I'll fold a napkin better than you do, like it's like, cool. Yeah, great. I love that I never would have put those things together, but it's pretty magic that she has.
Yeah, I Masterclass is great. One of my favorites is the Sarah Blakely one. That's a really good one. But
Oh,
yeah, what's that?
I'm gonna watch that now.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
it's really good. But yeah, I think of Martha Stewart now for the roasts. I don't know if you've watched those roasts on YouTube. I mean, it's her, like you said, Snoop Dogg and whoever else is there. But it's fascinating to see her journey. And when we're talking about the team and leadership, one of the things I know you're thinking about a lot is the power of creating together and creating good teams. So, how are you doing that going forward now that you've kind of, just learned a lot and have lessons from your, journey so far?
Yeah, it's a really complicated thing, especially for creatives. Like, there's a deep vulnerability in creating. Like, some people, if you were like, go draw a picture for me right now, like they're afraid. Like, they would feel really nervous to create anything. If I was like, write me a poem right now, like a lot of people will choke up and they don't want to. So there's so much bravery that's involved with just doing like creating anything, let alone creating. And then you're going to have a team of people that are going to tell you why that doesn't work, why that might not be the thing, or why it does work. But there's this deep trust that has to show up there, like trust in self and trust in the people around you, in order to do that work. And like, I do not I don't really have the answers for exactly how you make that meld together. I know a lot about what doesn't work and what shouldn't go on. um but
What have
maybe
you
to
found that doesn't work?
um not listening doesn't work. Everyone needs to feel heard. They need to feel like their idea, whatever they're coming to you with, was fully expressed and understood. And then they're much more prepared to let it go. It's like, I will hold on to it if I'm like, nah, you didn't really get me. You didn't really hear me. I wasn't. So listening is such a big one. Um,
Yeah,
and I
I
think
like that. What else doesn't work? So
what
not
else?
listening. We'll go the opposite of leadership. Sometimes
um,
it's easier to think of what
yes.
doesn't work than
Yeah.
actually what does.
Yeah, it is. Um, okay. The other thing that doesn't work, and I think this is a like pretty universal mistake. Um, it's like jumping into criticism. Like oftentimes when people are asked to give feedback, criticism is, I'm going to say good criticism is really hard to do. Basic criticism, anybody can manage. Like to be a beautiful, like to be a like a very powerful critic, I think is an art form for sure. But to just criticize is like pretty, we can all do that. The people that I've worked with that are magic will find what's working. They'll see the glimmer, they'll see the thing, they'll look for that first. So I think don't not listen and um you got to train your mind to not go to what's not working first.
Yeah, I love it. From a lot of times the power of story is really big, and the power of story is to influence and change. We were talking before we hit record. There's some really cool organizations that you worked with. Own Cancer sticks out. Can you talk about Own Cancer and what you did with them?
Yeah, so that was a bunch of different like big Calgary organizations coming together, creating a capital campaign. So I think they needed $275 million. There was already a bunch of government funding, but it's the Calgary Cancer Center will be one of the leading cancer centers in North America, but they needed this chunk of change still. And then I think they also needed some swagger, like a reason to believe in themselves. So they came to us and they wanted us to create a campaign. And cancer's tricky, right? Like everybody knows somebody, like everyone has a person close to them that they lost to cancer, everyone. Um, so the stakes are high emotionally already. Um, and then it was like during COVID. So also everyone's pretty burnt out on sadness. Like it was like, I'm not going to feel sad about one more thing. Like I don't want to, I just can't. Like, I don't care if like a baby penguin just got murdered. Like I'm already so sad. Like I can't indulge that emotionally right now. And I think that's the, temperature of the cultural climate was just like, we're done with that. Like it's already super depressing. Like, please don't depress me more. So we wanted to give it a voice that had swagger. And that's where the line Own Cancer came from. This
It's more
notion,
empowering than like sad.
it's not sad. Yeah. It's
Mm.
kind of like a big, F you to cancer. It's like, we're going to do something about this. And then we, super talented copywriter that was working for us, wrote this really beautiful commercial where like in the beginning you sort of think like cancer's taking the patient down, but then you realize that's us talking and we're taking cancer down, and it's like, cancer, we're coming for you with everything we've got. And we used real people who are fighting cancer in the video, and there's two of them that have since died. And so watching that video now, for me, like I'll get teary eyed because it's like, we got to do this. Like there has to be some bravado. There has to be some punchback. Like there needs to be a bit of fight, less tears.
So what kind of work did you end up having to do with them?
So created the platform, like the Own Cancer platform, which is a weird thing, but we do a lot of that. Like we have a technology institute here, and we're helping them with like, how do we brand our capital campaign? Like what do we talk about as we're trying to raise money? And it's not a building and it's not a program. So Own Cancer was the platform, the voice of that. And then there's a visual identity that went along with that. There was a bunch of billboards, and then we created a television spot that they shared.
Talk about some of the client milestones from starting your own agency, what was the first major milestone that you remember from a client perspective?
Oh yeah. Um, Probably Bow Valley College was a big one. Like I remember it was a, big chunk of change for us at the time, and they wanted to rebrand and do a full advertising campaign. And I remember thinking like, did they mean to call us? Like, do they know that they just gave us this business? Like, are they sure, Um,
How did they find you?
and, we were big enough at the time that we were known, like, and normally through like you'll get invited to an RFP. So they knew of us, but I felt like we were a long shot, like just small, young, didn't really have like a body of work that was super comparable. Um, yeah, and then when they awarded us the business, like that was insane. I was thrilled and so proud of the work that we did with them too, because Bow Valley College has a lot of short courses. It tends to be kids that go when they're like 21 or 22. And like Reddit was like, last chance you, like, this is for the dummies. Like, it was really like, oh, you're stupid. That's why you went to Bow Valley College, was sort of like, that's what everybody thought at the time. But again, we dove into strategy, and it's like, that's not the case. Like, these are like the kids of immigrants, and they don't have trust funds that are paying for their 4-year arts degree. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're college, you're going to university and like there's a campus pub. Like, guess what? Bow Valley College doesn't have that. Like, there are no intramurals because everyone there has to work. Like talk about hustle culture. Like, that's Bow Valley College. And interviewing the students and talking to the teachers, like you're not going there if you're lazy. Like, you just aren't. You're going there if you want to make moves in your life. And that was such a profound insight, and also felt so good because this kind of vibe of like, oh yeah, it's for the dum-dums. It was like, no, it's not. Like, we're not telling that story anymore. And it was, it was disrespectful to the organization and to the students. Like, the brand was like not the brand itself, but the brand perception was so misaligned with the ethos of the organization. So getting to tell that story felt amazing. And we did a great job. I'm still so proud of that work. I love seeing the work out there. And I know it's massively changed their organization and how people see it. So that felt great.
What was another milestone from a client perspective?
Um, we got fired by a really big client, which was tough. Like, that was a hard one. We had won a really major piece of business. And it was just like they were not picking up what we were putting down. And we saw the writing on the wall. But when they were like, hey, like it was a 3-year contract and they fired us after 2. And it was a big chunk of money. Like, I was also like, it hurts from a financial perspective, but was so valuable on the other side because I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wish I had done differently. And I did not use my voice. Like, I felt like I had sort of tried, but I should have been more forceful sooner. Forceful is maybe not the right word, but more articulate, convincing earlier on, instead of letting it get to where it got to. And then if we'd parted ways, it would have been very clear why we were parting ways. But I think there was some passivity, and we almost became like order takers. We're like, fine, like, you're a terrible client, like, we'll just do what you want, but sort of like a pouty, like a very immature response. Whereas now I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing this problem the same way you're seeing it. Like, I really don't think that this is the right way to proceed.
You'd
Like,
push back a little bit more based on what your thoughts are, instead of like, you may have disagreed with some of the instruction or requests.
Yes. Yeah. So it's something now with my clients, I'm very mindful of, like, if I don't disagree, you are for sure, like, if I think this is the wrong way to proceed, you are very much going to understand that I'm going to have said it to you. It's going to be in writing. We can still go do the thing that I don't think is a good idea. That's okay. But I'm really going to
You
speak
said your piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you would have done differently? So in that one case, you would have just took a strong stance and been more vocal about it. And then it's kind of up to them to make whatever decision they make. But at least you said your piece. Anything else, looking back, you would have done differently?
Um, yeah, I mean, I feel it. Like, when the work is good and when there's alignment, like, I feel good. Like, it makes me happy. I'm excited to go to work. Like, I'm into the meetings. Like, there's an energy to things. There's a vibe. There's a mood. When that's not there anymore, like, I know right away now that something's off. And um, life is too short, and to just continue on and sort of those, like, complacency, like, we're just drones all doing the same thing we've always done. I'm allergic to that energy. And now when that shows up, it's like, we got to switch it. Like, this isn't, have the hard conversation, say the thing, like, light the building on fire, but don't proceed down sort of this, you know, track of banality.
Is that to you when you feel that sometimes I feel like people can't put a finger on what it is. So do you just say that? Like, hey, I'm feeling something's off, like, and just open it that way? Or do you usually have an idea of here's why it's off?
Um, I'll feel it before I'll be able to put words to it. Um, for sure, it's an intuitive thing. And now I'm just really diligent about putting words to it. And it's like, I don't mind saying, like, these are my instincts. I think this is a bad way to go. Like, that's instinctual. I don't know the future. I can't know. This doesn't feel right to me for these reasons. Like, this is what's coming up. I'm just sharing where I'm at. It doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means, like, this is my perspective, and I want to give you the benefit of it, and I want the benefit of yours, because, there's other times where someone's like, no, hey, look at it this way. And I'm like, okay, all right, good point. Like, sweet, great. Let's move on. But I think if you don't drive towards those hard conversations, and sometimes it's like the little peas under the mattress, like, go search them out, like, bring them, have tricky conversations. Like, this is going to be so awkward. Let's talk about it anyways. Like, that makes me happier. That makes work better. It makes relationships better.
No, thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful to hear how you think about it. Stephanie, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to point people towards daughtercreative.com to learn more. So if you've watched the video at this point, you've seen some of the work and cool stuff that they do, but you can check it out at their website as well. Last question is just mentors who've been influential on your business, career, life. I know you mentioned the coach at the Culture Smith. Who are some other mentors from a business perspective for you that have, imparted some interesting lessons?
Yeah, shout out to my dad on this one. He's also in EO, and a very talented entrepreneur.
What is his business?
It's called Longview. So it's a very established IT company, offices across North America. And I watched him, he's had two businesses, and I watched him grow and sell one and then grow the other. And the lessons he learned along the way, a lot of them I just sort of absorbed through osmosis almost, but his ethos, the way he thinks about business and the purpose of it, has been super powerful. And also, the way he treats clients and employees and the people in his ecosystem has always been the the gold standard for me.
Awesome. Stephanie, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out more episodes of the podcast. Check out daughtercreative.com, and we'll see everyone next time. Stephanie, thanks so much.
So nice chatting with you. Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.